All right, hey, this is Justin Pritchard here, Jay the Gray, with the Grayed Out Podcast, Episode 2. Tonight we're going to be looking at one of the things that defined the podcast as a whole. I know last episode we went over the entire framework of why I'm doing what I'm doing, if that matters. But this episode really is going to be circling around the idea of what it means to be politically homeless. Politically homeless being a term that I'm going to use a lot because it's where I find myself living. And I think it's a growing number of people in our society and culture are feeling this way, feeling like they don't belong to one side or the other. Unfortunately, I believe there's a great deal of I wouldn't say shame. Shame's probably not the right word. But there's a great deal of secrecy about it because I'm not sure I want to really out myself as politically homeless because that means I disagree with both sides and oh my gosh, could my lunch get eaten then? So in order to kind of dive into this, I've done a little bit of research, been out on the old interwebs looking for a few things to help us determine what it means to be I can't even say the word, politically homeless. Or, for lack of a better term, or maybe a different term, a political nomad, if that suits you better. Maybe that's more to your liking, political nomad. But hey, that's you. I like politically homeless. Maybe it's a beard thing. I don't know. All that said, I just kind of want to move forward, looking at what it means to be politically homeless in this day and age, why it's growing, what defines it, and how we, as the politically homeless, as the political nomads, if really again, that might be even better. If that defines you, why it might be better, honestly, if we took time to speak out and say, this is us. Because again, I believe wholeheartedly there is a huge section of society, our culture, that is indeed politically homeless, and they are unwilling or afraid. Afraid seems so harsh to say afraid, like you're afraid. But there's a block. There's something preventing you from just saying, I'm politically homeless. I don't know if it makes one feel uninformed. I don't know if it makes one feel like they can't defend a position. I'm not sure. But we're going to journey through this together, and here's what we got. Been out on the interwebs, and here's what I've found. First off, we should say, politically homeless or political nomad, maybe because we just made that one up, no definition to be found on Wikipedia, which seems to be the harbinger of all interwebs knowledge next to Google. Wikipedia always has a page on something. There's no Wikipedia page for politically homeless. Maybe I should start one. Look into that. So there's no definition there. But this term's becoming so common, it's got to be defined somehow. So I thought, well, let's look at some of the old traditional definitions that might define someone who's politically homeless, like independent or moderate. And so I went out, found it, and here's what Wikipedia says about being an independent. An independent voter, often also called an unaffiliated voter, in the United States is a voter who does not align themselves with a political party. An independent is variously defined as a voter who votes for candidates or on issues rather than on the basis of political ideology or partisanship. So far, I like this. A voter who does not have a long-standing loyalty to or identification with a political party. Now, here's where it gets really good. A voter who does not usually vote for the same political party from election to election, a voter who self-describes as an independent. In the British parliamentary system, they may be referred to as floater voters. I love it. I'm like, sign me up. Floater voter. Done. T-shirt me. I'm in. Maybe. On the fence. You guys can help. Let me know. Floater voter. What do you think? I'm not sure. So here's the thing. It sounds good. Except when you've been exposed to the American political system or politics in general, you realize while that's true, maybe for the voters, right, maybe for someone like you and I, we could say we're independent. But note, there's an independent version of politics, right? There's an I, there's a D, there's an R. And an independent, when we're looking at people that are in Congress, in the Senate, like I said in the last episode, Bernie Sanders is an independent. But really, there are a lot of there are a few independents out there, but they largely have an agenda. And when you look into it, you do a little bit of digging, you can find that agenda. And I'm not saying that everyone's without agenda, or that even I'm without an agenda. I mean, clearly, you start digging, you'll find things that people stand for, and that's fine. But the reality is, because of that, it tends to mean that really what they are is they're a Democrat or a Republican that really just don't want to affiliate for whatever their voting bloc is for that reason, right? Maybe they're a Democrat that represents a largely conservative county, but people kind of like their ideas, and so they didn't want to come out as a Democrat for fear of just being rejected. So that said, independent, in the political sense, maybe. Now, the other term that I wanted to look up was moderate. What makes a moderate voter? This is a little bit of, more of the same almost, but moderate, according to Wikipedia, is an ideological category which designates a rejection of radical or extreme views, especially in regard to politics and religion. A moderate is considered someone occupying any mainstream position, avoiding extreme views and major social change. Now, here's the issue with that. I think that it's still defined by a side. You're either a moderate Democrat or a moderate Republican. And so you can largely have a home and be a moderate, right? We have those moderate politicians that are floating around Washington, D.C. doing moderate things, but they're still aligned to their political party. What I'm getting at is people that literally are in this classic term of an independent voter, but have zero allegiance and don't want to find themselves defined by a party. And so, hence, we have the politically homeless. Now, definitions aside, the internet was wrought with. There were plenty of examples of the way media has dealt with, or the way being politically homeless is present in our culture and society, and the way it's becoming more and more present. So, doing a lot of research, I came up with a few articles in Great Britain where clearly they have, right, this problem of the politically homeless, which is interesting because in the U.S., we have a largely two-party system, and that two-party system can really draw a divide, right? Now, you have third parties, if we're honest, but if we're really honest, those third parties have minimal impact on the political landscape, right? You have your Green parties, you have Tea Party, Libertarian Party, all of these different, and even the Tea Party is not really a party, it's a subsection of the Republicans. So you have third parties, these minor parties, but they're really ineffectual when it comes to the political process, although some people would argue that they have a massive effect when their candidate doesn't get elected, although I think it's actually not the case. So, in Britain, they have the parliamentary system, so they have multiple parties. But here's what's interesting about this article. It's written December of 2019 for the Guardian by a gentleman named Phil McDuff. And I'm not sure where Phil McDuff stands politically, but this is what he said about being politically homeless. He calls it fashionable to be politically homeless, but then goes and says it's also callous and detached. And then he goes on to offer a bunch of opinions about which party he believes offers all the hope. So his view of political homelessness is clearly kind of packed in front of, he front loads and says, well, it's this because my party says you should think this way. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the issue. When someone who's politically homeless wants to make decisions based on issues, based on things that are happening present time, not historical, right, things back then, or not really thinking in the, 20 years from now. I want to know what we're going to do right now to start making changes that will better society, better our country, better us as a people, help us move forward. And we want to know that, and we want to know it simply. We want to have information. We don't want to have talking points. We don't want to have rhetoric. We just want to make a decision. But then when you have people like Mr. McDuff who say it's callous. Callous. I mean, callous is really a hard term, right? And detached. Meaning basically, if you're politically homeless, you're more or less the equivalent of a junior high student who's like gone girl or boy crazy, depending on, if you're a junior high boy who's just crazy about it, just aloof, detached, I'm just, And And that therein lies the problem. Like, you can't be politically homeless because it makes you insensitive and it makes you wrong, and you need to come over to this side and be on my side because my side's correct. So this article wasn't super helpful, but it helped point to a certain angle as to why I think being politically homeless is a hard thing to just come out about and say, hey, this is where I stand and I want information. One of the other things that came across was really interesting. The New York Times, I'm going to be honest, if I look at the New York Times, 90% of the time, they are completely left-leaning. They really, they have a lot of stuff out there floating that really kind of lays their political thoughts, positions, opinions out, and they're happy with that. So, but in this is what it says. Do you feel you don't? This is I'm sorry, I should have mentioned. This is an article from February of this year. So this is just a couple months ago. This is Sabrina Tavernise. I hope I said that correctly. If she gets around to Ms. Tavernise. She writes an article that says, do you feel that you don't fit in politically? We want to hear from you. So the New York Times recognizes this is going on, recognizes this is on the rise in our culture. And they're like, hey, can you come out? Can you tell us what you think and why you feel this way? So they're opening a door. I just hope they're ready to hear what may come along on the back end of that. And I hope it's not loaded with when they go to paint this picture that it's all a myriad of one-sided issues. Because I think they're going to be, if everything's honest, there's going to be a lot of two-sided, like, this is why I feel this way. Neither side is foot in the bill right now. They're both kind of like meh. So this is from the New York Times. That was just February of this year, and then I came across one more article and I will link all of these as best I can in either the podcast notes or on the YouTube channel in the description below. So you can kind of go and look at these articles yourself. This is from The Spectator, and this is a writer named Bethany. Again, I'm going off of phonetics here. Fatasi, we'll go with that. And this was August of last year, and it's called, the article is entitled, "The Battle Cry of the Politically Homeless." And it basically says, anyone moderate with a brain and anything to lose has largely gone silent. And I kind of feel like that's true. That's really true. Because if you say something in opposition to something, it's never because you think, like, I don't think that's a good, solid idea. It always kind of comes down to, you're stupid. And I mean, that sounds so, like, childish, but man, have you been on Twitter lately? And if you're not on Twitter, maybe you're better off staying off of Twitter. But if you ever want to go see some, like, stuff, go and look up some political posts on Twitter, and you look in the replies, like, go down, like, ooh. I mean, some of you, depending on your social media habits, no matter where you go, if you see something political, you already understand, right? You watch the comments. It's never like, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or that's a really interesting idea, we should discuss that. It's always like, it's like freshman year of high school, just names and words, and it's awful. So this article kind of goes through as to why she happens to be politically homeless, and how it's not based on one side or the other. It's literally trying to navigate the middle ground and find the meat of the matters. And so those are some of the things I found out there that really help define and describe, well, maybe not define, but at least point to this growing phenomena of political homelessness in the United States. So here's what I think. What does it mean that this is happening? What is the cause of this? Or at least, because we all know, like, moderate thought and independent thought go back as far as the country's founding. So it's not new for people to kind of be stuck in the middle, but now this sort of idea that I don't have a place to go, and people starting to, like, just get it out there that that's where we are, that seems to be, to me, a new phenomena. So here's what I think is some of the reasons it's going on. And here's where we'll start. 1, the political divide has never been more prominent than it is today. Never. I mean, going back through my high school experience, because let's be honest, when I was in junior high and going into the beginning of high school, Ronald Reagan was president, and the chants of USA, USA, and everyone. And I know not everyone was happy with Ronald Reagan. There was political sparring back then, and there has been, again, back to the founding, right? You go back and you look up classic newspapers, and you look at some of the editorial opinions, some of the cartoons back then. We think they're vicious now. Holy cow, they would no holds barred kind of stuff back then. Not that it's gotten any better. I just don't know that it's any worse. The political discourse has been an issue forever. But now, with the rise of social media, the way everything works, it's just so prevalent. Everywhere you look, it's just the other side. The other side is always other siding. If they would think like us, and if they would, it's a constant barrage of rhetoric, and it makes you feel like if you're in the middle, you have no place to go. There's no way to identify with either side, because all you're getting is the other side is evil. There's no discourse about thought. There's no you're just like, oh. And then on top of that, when you get down from that exposure, social media wise, you get down to the just personal interactions, people's visceral reactions to other people's politics is just bizarre. It's bizarre. It immediately assumes the worst about the other person. You must think that way because you're the devil, basically. Is what it comes down to. You're the worst possible human in human history because you think like this, and it's just ridiculous to assert that you know that much about someone based on their thoughts, their political adherences, and it doesn't do us any good moving forward as a society if we're going to keep doing that. But it's plastered everywhere, and so the traditional definitions, like we talked about, of independent and moderate, they really don't seem to fit anymore. Because on the one hand, like I said, you have independent, which seems to kind of slide into this weird political space of not really being independent, but not wanting to commit to either side. But you have an agenda, and that's your agenda. And then moderates really just seem to be moderates on either side, right? You have moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, and that's where they are. So those definitions don't seem to fit. So there you see this sort of I just am longing for something more. I'm like, I want a better position to stand in, and I want raw information. And that leads me to the second point. The media and the news are not doing us any favors. None. Now, before we get into this is not what I'm saying. I'm not going to get all lamestream media, fake news, blah, 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 blah. I'm not doing that. And I'm not but if we are honest, when political discourse becomes prominent in the news, it is hard to find unbiased, factual reports about what's going on. And if you and I, if that's what we want, we've got to really go digging. And 90% of the time, we got to go find it in another country's news. Just because they're going to just report the facts. But when we get into our news, even at the local level, it tends to skew towards how the local people feel, right? You're hiring your local newscasters. Your local newscasters may slide to that more left-leaning Democratic side or that right-leaning Republican side, and there you go. And I realize that I'm doing that backwards, but I don't care. They're going to find that space, and they're going to speak from that bias, and it's not helpful. Now, let's take it to the next level. When you get to cable news, when you get to the cable news level, and you're looking at your Foxes and your CNNs and your MSNBCs and all these things, let's be honest. Everyone on those channels has a bias. Fox is clearly a right-leaning, conservative-based news network. CNN, MSNBC are clearly, and if you don't believe me, I would just challenge you, go out there, watch, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Here's the problem, though. If you're just a person, a normal person, and you have a bias, you already have a way that you lean, you're going to find the thing that feeds the way you lean because it affirms the way you feel. You're going to find that place that's going to feed you information that makes you go, yeah, that is right. I've been thinking that way, and you know what? That's correct. That's right. I'm glad I turned here, and now I know that my thinking wasn't, completely crazy off my rocker. But the problem is that without that contrarian thought, without that disagreement, that discourse, do you really know why you think that way? Is it really founded in the actual information, or is it just because you're like, yeah? And in this, we have to look no further than some of those personalities, right? Because you have on the one side, a Sean Hannity, or a Tucker Carlson, a Laura Ingraham, and on the other side you have Don Lemon and Anderson Cooper, and the list goes on both sides, and they're just out there saying what they want about the people they like and painting the other side as rotten, evil, horrible. And so the media is not doing us any favor. And here's what's funny. I recently saw a video, and I'm going to link this as well. A discussion between Bill Maher from Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO had a guest on named Matt Taibbi. And Matt Taibbi is a journalist for the Rolling Stone. And they were having a discussion about the inability of media based on the media, that particular skewed view of the president. And that because of either like really loving the president or really hating the president, people are reverse engineering their opinions about things based on if they want to cover for or expose or vice versa the president. Again, none of that is helpful. None of that is helpful. Like, we need to, at least at one point, at least it seemed like when I was a kid, I remember the news was just the news. And it gave facts and information, and that was really it. And so now we have this social media exposing and then creating and highlighting this political divide, and people feel the need to go and pick a side, and then when they're on that side, that other side is just the worst thing in the world. We talked about that in the first episode. This ain't football. So being politically homeless, right, means you're standing in the middle, you're looking for information. And if that's the case, I'm going to say it right now, the best thing you can do is get online, right? Get on Twitter. Go out, get some podcasts going in your ear, get some contradicting thought in your mind that says other things, not just talking points, but literally listen to the thoughts and the processes of some of the people that don't think like you. Like, get it in your head so you can start kind of examining what you think, why you think, and then start listening to the candidates when these election years roll around, right? Looking at the bills, looking at the propositions, and trying to figure out what and why they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and then vote that way. So here's the idea. How do you determine if you're politically homeless? Well, here's how it works. If you have ever been called a conservative or any of the associated names, alt-right, neocon, Republican, I don't know, the list goes on in whatever you can think in that direction, by someone who's left-leaning, or if you've ever been called, right, liberal, or any of the associated, beautiful, wonderful libtard, snowflake, SJW, social justice warrior, whatever it is that, again, this is like, I listen to this and go, what are we all, just a bunch of freaking grade school kids, and all we know how to do is call names? We can't talk anymore. We can't discuss anymore, right? Now we're all Democrats and Republicans and neocons and libtards, and it's like, really, grow up, people. If we're going to be adults, we at least, you can have a side if you're going to be an adult and you're going to discuss things. And you're not going to call names because you disagree, right? There's not a demon around every corner. Not everyone's looking to do, probably everyone in the world is a little less evil than you think and probably not as nice as you think. So if you just, chill a little bit. But if you're in that space where you've been called the other side by both sides, right? And I really understood this clearly over years. Like, you become Too liberal for conservatives, too conservative for liberals. You find yourself in this weird space. And I shout out to a guy I follow on Twitter. We've messaged a couple times. His name's Rondell Trevino. He runs the Immigrant Coalition down in South Texas. And this guy, he gets this all the time, right? Because he thinks conservatively about some things and socially about others. And he gets called the worst things. And here's why. Because he wants to help immigrants, survive. And yes, he recognizes that some of them are not here, but they're still human, right? They're not here legal, but they're still human. And they deserve at least the basic of just human treatment, human rights, human like that. Can we just make sure that we're treating people with compassion and kindness? Even if we're going to turn around and send them back home, do we have to treat them like hardened criminals? To be very honest, if you're kind of on the fence about that, let me ask, would you really want to be locked up for getting a speeding ticket? Or would you want to get a warning and be sent home? I'm just going to say, let's look at it that way. And we can get into the discussion of sovereignty and all that kind of stuff. And it's not about the issue, but this is about Rondell saying, I want to treat people with compassion. I want to meet their base needs. And he gets called the worst names for it. And that's not acceptable. That's just not acceptable. That's not the way it should be. So here's what I think. If we in the middle, in that true middle, in that politically homeless, political nomad camp, right, want to start changing things and we want to see some things change, here's what I think has to happen. We have to start speaking out. We literally have to start saying that's who we are, what we are, and how we are. And we need to be open about it, and we need to start having those conversations, be more front and center so people will see that there's a larger block of voters than they think that are caught in the middle of the two sides, right? That it's not just a few swing voters in a few swing states, but there are a lot of people out there that want information they want to know so that they can make informed decisions every election. Every election. And so I think if we speak out and we say that would do so much for our political system. We can have some discussions about a lot of things that would be really great for our political system. But let's just start with that. If we, the politically homeless, we, the political nomads, right, said something about who we are. We just came out and said it. And this is who we are. I really think it would be better for our political system. I think it'd be better for our society. I think it'd be better for our culture in general to invite honest discourse back into our political sphere, public sphere, that we could have conversation about things, ideas, thoughts that matter. So that said, again, thanks for joining in. Thanks for being here for this episode. Thanks for listening along. And again, descriptions, everything will be loaded up in both the podcast notes and on the YouTube description. I hope you guys enjoy this. And once again, let's just be better. Right? Let's be better today. Let's be better tomorrow. Let's continue to just try and be better. Better people, humans, whatever. Just better. I thank all of you guys again for taking the time to be here. You guys have a great day.